Fickell's third year of spring open practice is behind us. Is the team finally ready to perform on the field, or do some fresh personnel losses mean we are in for another rough year? I'm Rajiv. He's Justin. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective. Woo-hoo! Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajiv and Justin, back together on a Sunday evening to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. On today's show, the Badgers put their talents out in public view yesterday as spring practice comes near its end with the 2025 Spring Showcase. Justin was in attendance, and I'm going to have him answer some big questions about what he saw. It's now official. Kevin Heywood is done for the year. Tanner Koziol has entered the transfer portal along with Mark Camper and Quincy Burrows, among others. Can this team withstand the losses it suffered this spring? Along with that comes a depth chart discussion. Does this team have enough at all positions, and how do we feel like the Badgers will line up in the fall? And just like last week, we have breaking news once again on the Bucky Report. So we're going to start there. But first and foremost, we're at the Bucky Report on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We appreciate all the support for the show. Justin, happy Easter. I'm wearing my little Easter shirt. It's a little. I'm not usually wearing a bright orange polo in the show, but
Rajiv going with pastels. Nice.
I mean, it's was just got back from a Brazilian steakhouse brunch with the family. I'm not feeling very good. That was a lot of meat.
As somebody who has gone to a Brazilian steakhouse with you before, I know that feeling.
I mean, it's not good. Not good. But it was good in the moment. But, anyway, happy Easter. How are you? How was your Easter today?
I'm good. It was great. Got to hang out with the family a little bit. I got to see my new little niece. She's a year and a half, and a little monster running around at the restaurant. So it was a blast. I always enjoy it because this is like one of my favorite eating holidays. Because we always go to a family style restaurant on this day, but it was a good time.
Any eating holiday is a good holiday, right? I mean, that's just what that is. But nonetheless, breaking news as we teased at the top of the show, we have another offensive lineman in the 2026 class. So we're going to talk a lot about the spring game. That's the first thing we're going to get to after we talk about Madison, Cochrane. Zach Bart's put it in here already. Maddox, not Madison. Maddox.
I put that in your head because I said it earlier.
Did this and it was Maddox Cochrane, 3-star commit. So 6'7", 280-pound offensive lineman, tackle, maybe guard. We'll see what Justin thinks about that. 247 composite 3-star out of Richmond, Virginia. He is the 6th player to enter the 2026 class. Justin, where does that bring our ranking to?
Yeah, that puts us at number 34 right now for the composite ranking standings. So we have moved up substantially over the last 2-3 weeks. Everyone that was freaking out about the size of the class, we didn't even make it to the official visits, and now we're kind of right where we want to be. I get it that we started a little slow to start the year, but hey, let's look at it over the last couple weeks. We got our quarterback for the class in. We got another offensive lineman. This class is going to be different than the last two. I will tell you that right now. We're starting to build up depth. I do think that the misses or the records from the last couple of years may sting us a little bit in the overall top, what our ranking is going to be, but I think it is going to be a very strong class again. It just might not be the darling class of being a top 25-ish class. I think we're probably looking at top 30 or so.
And I think that's okay because it's about filling out the roster, as you said, building kind of sort of depth, and it's complementary to what he's done the last couple of years.
And there's some really big top-end pieces that may fall in this class.
Right. I mean, we've talked about, running back Amari, Latimer. There's a lot of people out there that could bring it up. But ultimately, we know that Luke Fickell's got good recruiting pedigree. He's done that. He's done well so far. It's a good start to the class. June, obviously, is a big time, right? When we get more OVs and things like that, there can definitely be a lot more people that get added to it. But nonetheless, Maddox Cochrane, offensive. So let's first of all, quickly, let's touch on him a little bit. What are your thoughts on Cochrane from when you watch his film?
I like him. I spoke with Nick a little bit on this, asking him what the staff is thinking for him. Sounds like they're going to start him on the outside. I personally see him a little bit more as an interior guy. I think he's a big body. I think he is a guy who is very physical and strong and really likes to play violent. What I will say is he's got some work to do in terms of playing tackle. I don't love his kick step yet. That's something he's going to have to do a lot of work. So he's a guy who's going to require a lot of technique. He tends to reach a little bit more than I'd like to see from a guy. His feet get a little stationary at times. It's fine. He's got a lot of work to do. In worst case, you end up moving him inside, where I think he can be a real road grader type guard, where he'll be a brute on the interior. Reminds me favorably of Colin Coverley from a few classes ago, where I think he's a guy that he may surprise us at just being able to get himself in the two deep based off of how hard he plays and the effort that he gives. But I think the kid's going to end up really jumping. Again, we're looking at junior film, so there's a chance that a lot like Cam Clark, his senior film was a huge jump from where he was technique-wise the year prior. This is a guy who could substantially take a big leap going into his senior year too. So I'm really going to be interested to see what type of development we see over the next year.
Yeah, definitely a raw guy. Good size, though. I mean, 6'7", that frame is really good, and definitely a guy that you would imagine to be upwards of 315, 320-ish at some point, right? And whether that's a guard or – I mean, I think his size definitely means he could play tackle. I mean, that's obviously 6'7".
I would say he's probably right tackle. I don't see him as a left.
Right. And that's fine. I mean, I think that's okay. But ultimately, the lineman recruits have been good. Blazek is continuing to do a good job there. So, all right, let's move on to the spring game. Spring Showcase, as it's called this year. It was called the Launch. Then it was an open practice. Now it's the Spring Showcase. I know a lot of people were there. Obviously, Justin was there. I live too far away to have made the trip. Sadly, next year, I'm really going to try to make that happen. But of course, Ryan was there as well. I know a lot of the Locked On Bucky Report community was there. So hopefully you guys all got a chance to meet up. Justin, I'm going to toss it over to you a little bit to talk about some of your big sort of takeaways. And then I'm going to ask you what surprised you the most, what gets you most excited, and what your biggest concern are. So don't give those away right away. But let's just talk about overall thoughts. Start offensively. What are some of your overall takeaways from watching the practice?
Yeah, my overall takeaways from this right off the bat, what I will say, my impression is that we've gotten better on both sides of the ball. It's something that I wanted to see. That was the biggest deal to me coming into this was, do we look improved? Does it look more coherent? And does it look like this is something that, do we have upside? Me personally looking at this, I think there's upside with this team in terms of where we have an opportunity to go. I have no idea what that means in terms of what this team's ceiling is. But I do, for the first time in the last 3 years, look at it and see we got to see guys flash on the field that I'm like, I could legitimately see that guy turning into a potential star player. Are they there yet? No, I would say no. But right now, I think there's enough flashing that you can say there's a chance that if this person can be consistent, we could have some really good players on this team.
Nice. I did want to, Mr. October put up, this was the overall vibe energy good, or as good as 7,800 people could make it. Good impression on the high school kids in attendance. One thing I will say about this, I have heard various things about how the crowd was light. It's Easter weekend. Let's just remember that. Like Easter weekend.
There's also a Bucks playoff series and the Brewers.
I mean, who, by the way, go Pacers, let's go. I think that I have heard a lot of this stuff about the number of people that are there. It's fine. It's okay, right? Like it's Easter weekend. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have a ton of people there on Easter. And frankly, I'm not a big believer in it's open practice, right? It's not an official sort of spring game, if you will, but it basically is. It's just to the point where ultimately it's what you see. It's not really who was there. I don't think that matters too much. That being said, if it wasn't on Easter weekend, I think we would have had a lot more people sort of show up there. So, Justin, who flashed offensively for you? Who are some of the key names?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, the running backs did, of course. Dylan Jones, I think, is legitimately going to be the number one running back. Like, I think that we're moving quickly to the point where I don't think that that's in question. And that's fine because I know I'm a huge Dupree guy, but I've always thought that Dylan Jones, in terms of being an overall like workhorse type running back, was the guy who had more of that skill set. And I think that's fine. I think that gives you opportunity to use Dupree in some of the ways you'd like to, which is to showcase him more as a receiver, do some interesting things with him and try to get him in space. Whereas you can now focus more on Dylan Jones and why is his name even Yakimelli being able to be more of your guys who you want to work on the inside. And then Atuka looked really good in this. practice too. Like, he's taken a big step. I think he's a guy who's getting his body right and kind of slimmed himself down and has put himself into a shape to be somebody who, if called upon, could play a role this year. And you would never think twice about it. Like, if we had to give him 15 carries, I'd feel good about it. But I'm hopeful that we don't have to get to that point just because of the depth that's on this team and some of the guys that we want to see be young and play. I will say it's very clear to me Vinny Anthony is our best receiver, and I think that he's set up for a big season this year. I actually think he looks like he could be really good. And then obviously the other receiver I would say that really stuck out to me is Eugene Hilton. You've been high on him since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be in the 2 deep. I'll be shocked if he's not. The guy just is open. He's constantly open. And when I look at that, the only other person that I look that seems to have that ability is Vinny. So you have 2 guys who I think are going to be able to be capable of creating separation consistently. And I think that's going to play.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to talk about depth chart today, which we're going to do now that we've had some people leave the program and things like that. So we are going to get into that. Defensively, Justin, people that showed out to you, guys that kind of stood out as you were watching practice yesterday.
Defensively, both inside linebackers, Allegro and Taggart Curtis, look really good. Catalano actually looks really good for a true freshman. The edges, the speed rushers on the edge, I was not expecting them to pop as much to me as they were. I actually think Fearbury, Cheeks, and Nick Clayton, who obviously put on a show yesterday, are guys who clearly can get upfield and challenge a tackle. I think that if the interior of the defensive line is going to be what we think it is, which is going to be solid, those guys are going to have an opportunity to attack, and I think they're going to be able to make some plays.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love to hear that. We got some really good comments here. I know a lot of you guys were there as well. Zach Bart says, I agree, both sides improved. The 24 class has taken some steps forward. Jameer Scott had a nice day. Willer, Howard, and other D linemen had some good plays.
Willer top 2. Well. For a guy who's slimmed down a little bit, he actually he was a little bit more. He was quicker than I was expecting for his size. I was expecting him to be a little bit of a plotter. He's actually pretty quick off the edge for that initial burst.
Yeah, and I like to hear Howard's name here. We've been talking about him for a couple years, and I hope that he can find his way into the 2 deep as someone who can look. He's got the size to be that zero tech guy, and I hope he can do that. But
I think he's going to play. I hope that he plays enough, honestly, because realistically, he's going to be the guy on the interior next year. You're looking at him and Dylan Johnson as your probably primary guys on the inside, and then you have a guy on the outside like Michael Garner that you're going to probably have still around. But for the most part, those are going to be the young bodies that you're relying on next year as your upperclassmen to kind of run that room.
Matt Agnew says, agree about the outside guys. There were some solid negative plays yesterday from the D versus an O-line that we think is going to be pretty good. We are going to talk about that O-line because it's going to look a little bit less. Kevin says, Justin, were the receivers getting any separation?
Yeah, I thought Vinny was doing a good job of getting separation. I thought Hilton did. We saw a couple plays made by the slot guys, but nothing too crazy. There was a nice catch by KBJ, Kyneberry Johnson, when Carter Smith was in at quarterback. They didn't flash as much as some of the other guys. Ballard showed some really good speed on an end around, but we didn't really see a ton of him just getting loose and going deep. We'll see. The number one offense really didn't take a lot of deep shots. I'll say that right now. A lot of it was intermediate. They just couldn't get somebody loose. I thought the defense played pretty well. Like, I know Ryan thought that the offense maintained drives, and I'll agree with his sentiment there. I thought that was one of the things I took away from it initially to start this is the offense looked like it was pretty crisp. It was able to maintain drives and move the ball down the field. The running game I think is going to be substantially better than it was last year. The pass blocking, we'll see, because we had a really good pass blocking offensive line last year. The loss at tackle will be really interesting because, and I know we're going to get into that, but Layden Nelson, he's got some work to do to get ready for this. So hopefully he really locks in and puts the time in and is ready to go by fall. But it's going to be some work.
Tyler Schreiber says, why did some guys have names on their jerseys and some didn't? Do they have to earn that? I wanted to put this up there because I watched, while I was not there, I've watched every video I could find and I've read everything I could read about the spring practice and listened to anyone I could listen to. It drives me crazy, Tyler, because I don't know all their numbers. So I was watching, I saw Luke Emmerich get the pick that Billy Edwards threw. And I'm like, I don't know who that guy is. I had to pull up my roster. I had to look number 20. I'm like, hey, that's Luke Emmerich. Can I not have some names on the back jerseys? I don't know who the numbers are. I hate it. Drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that. That's tough. I don't know if that was the case or not. I don't really know what the reasoning behind it is at this point. But it's with how many new players? I mean, we have 30 plus new players that are involved. And there's going to be even more new bodies jumping in there. And in post-spring, when the roster has some changeover here, there's going to be even more because we're going to see guys leave the team or whatever. They're going to have to cut this roster down. Like there's going to be some walk-ons or whatever that are going to disappear, which might lead to some guys changing their numbers. It's going to be kind of a mess, and hopefully that gets figured out and we know what's all going on prior to fall camp, but we'll see. I don't know if we'll probably won't see a roster update. I would guess like a legitimate official roster until maybe like the Big Ten meetings, if not the start of camp.
Which, by the way, speaking of the Big Ten meetings, I'm going to be there. Very excited about that. July here in Vegas. Let's go. Bringing the Big Ten meetings out to Vegas. All right, Justin. Quick questions here on what you saw. What surprised you the most yesterday? What was the one thing you're like, whoa, was not expecting that?
I would say probably Danny O'Neill. I've been critical of him because I was worried about his mobility. His mobility really stood out to me yesterday. He's probably the shiftiest guy out of the quarterback room right now. Has a lot more quickness than I was expecting. I think he's going to be capable enough to manipulate the pocket with his mobility to create himself some throwing lanes in a way that Locke just wasn't able to in his time here. And that's a big deal because we saw that's one of the ways that Russell Wilson did it. It helped that Russell Wilson also had an NFL arm, which Danny O'Neill doesn't have that kind of a cannon on him. But just being able to find himself some passing lanes is going to be a big deal.
You and Ryan did a show about Danny O'Neill, and I listened to that, and I'm glad that you said that. And it's good because, look, the last 2 seasons we've had our starting quarterback go down, right? And Tanner Mordecai not for the entire season. Of course, Tyler Van Dyke, lost him, and it's good to know that the number 2 behind Billy Edwards, should he get injured, is a guy that can be, in the mix and can do some nice things. So I'm very happy to hear about that. And I think that's huge. All right. What gets you the most excited?
Yeah, I think to me, a couple of things here. I think the defense is going to be improved to the point where it will at least be solid this year. And by solid, I mean, they're going to be capable of creating some negative plays. The other thing is going to be, I legitimately feel like the first time in a few years that the running game is going to be a real plus. And by that, I mean, the offensive passing game is not going to have to be world beaters in order to be functional, because I legitimately think we're going to have times with this offense that we're going to be able to just run the ball down teams' throats. And we haven't been able to do that in a few years. But I think with Grimes in this offense, there were enough consistent 6 yards a pop, 5 yards here, 7, 8 yards watching yesterday. And the defense did a pretty good job of closing stuff up. To be clear, I wasn't seeing the defensive line get washed out during these times, but the offensive line was legitimately creating holes. So one of the things that I will say is that we want to see this team prove that it has an identity. And that is going to be one of the things that I think is going to be the starkest difference this year, is that you're going to look at it and be like, we're running the football, and working off of that, what we can do in the passing game is going to depend on how good we'll actually be. But right now, I think that things are going to be much more coherent. And I think we're legitimately going to look far better offensively than we did last year.
Love to hear that, man, because we can't look a lot worse than we did last year. That's for sure.
This does not, to be clear, this does not mean we're going to have this dominant offense. It just means it's going to be
better,
significantly better than how inept we looked at times where things just didn't look right watching the offense last year. It's going to look like you understand what we're trying to do this season in comparison.
Right. And lastly, on the spring game, what's your biggest concern after watching the open practice?
I think we need to see this. There's been the one thing I will say about yesterday, and I don't think people are making enough of this. There was a lot of personnel groupings that were flushing around back and forth. I would like to see the passing game let it rip a little bit and get more locked in. We did struggle. Leighton Nelson really struggled with pressure off the edge at times yesterday. And I think that kind of threw a wrench in us being able to see what this passing game can potentially be. But that is the biggest area where I would like to have seen more, is who are the receivers that we're going to rely on the most, and seeing what they can do when you have the same personnel group out that you expect to have out on the bulkier drives, and just what happens when they're all working together consistently.
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting team, right? There's a lot of discussion back and forth about guys that could really make an impact this year, and it's just spring ball. We've got several months now to talk about it and to look ahead to the season. But Justin, we did lose quite a bit this week, just this week even. We did tease it a little bit, not tease it. We did talk about it a little last week, but it became official after our show that Kevin Heywood is out for the year with an ACL injury. Our thoughts go out to him. He's a guy that you and I have been very, very high on for a long time. And I will say this, he'll be back. He's a guy that's mentally strong, I think, and he's going to come back better than ever. But it does leave quite the hole. We also lost Mark Hamper and Quincy Burrows, two potential pass catchers on this team that we were excited about. Obviously, Quincy Burrows has been around the program for a while. Mark Hamper was the guy that we brought in this year that was going to bring a little more experience and veteran sort of leadership into that receiver room. He is now gone. We've lost a couple other guys, Jensen on the line. So there's been a little bit of a loss. And I think one of the questions, and we had a question here, but I already lost it, but about the portal needs at this point, right? So how can we replace what we have? And I will start off by saying, I think it's absolutely paramount that you replace Kevin Heywood. You are not going to get a starter. You're not going to go find a Kevin Heywood. I understand that. But you can get a depth piece that can play tackle and that has experience playing tackle. You can look in the portal, and I'm sure you're going to find guys that don't feel like they're getting the run that they need after their spring practices at maybe another Big Ten school or an SEC school or whatever, or even a smaller school. There has to be depth brought into the line. We're going to go over our two deep, and I'm telling you, the line doesn't look very pretty. It's one guy that's gone, but that kind of shifts a lot of pieces around, and it's dicey, Justin. And I think you absolutely have to replace Heywood, and he is a big portal need as far as I'm concerned. We've got to get someone in that can shore up things at the left tackle position, because it's not something that we're comfortable with. And you even talked about Leighton Nelson yesterday.
Yeah, and I think, listen, ideally you'd be saying Barrett Nelson, but obviously he can't stay healthy, and then Benchall's out too. So two of your bigger depth pieces on that offensive line are out right now, which really kind of puts us in flux. And maybe we're making too much of that. Maybe they're being held out simply for the sake of being like, you're upperclassmen, you're a little dinged up. We need you to be ready for fall camp, not spring. And it's as simple as that. And maybe that's the case. But right now, I feel a little uneasy knowing what we're knowing. And I agree with you. I think that left tackle position, I think you have to get a body that you feel can at least compete. Because if something were to happen to Nelson, I just have no idea what you do after that. You'd have to probably bump up Bruner. I mean, that's really the only logical spot. There are people asking if you'd move Malman. I just think that makes no sense.
Yeah.
You're taking him from a position that is a strength for him to shift him to a spot where it becomes where he is significantly weaker, I would guess, and then making the right side a weakness. Right now, you have 4 spots that are, for better or worse, pretty close to being locked in. I actually think, to me, you ideally don't want to shift anything else around. I actually think you have some flexibility, given that I personally think that Mandel will be the right guard come the season, which means Kadenko is probably your swing guard. He's going to probably be your interior guy. But I would be shocked if they want to mess with Malman, and I don't want Brunner being bumped out, which means you have to find somebody who can play that spot.
Yeah, I did a show with Ryan earlier this week, and I said a very similar thing. I don't like shuffling because all that does is bring more positions into the mix of not doing well.
Yep.
Right now, as you said, we know that Malman on that right tackle position works. We know that Renfro and Brunner, those guys are locked in. Those are all starters from last year. Whether you slot in Mandel at right guard, whether it's Kadonko, whether it's Benchwall, whatever it is, that's one position that there's a little bit of question marks. And of course, there's a left tackle where Jack Nelson's gone. Now Kevin Heywood's gone. So that really clearly is the big thing. Now, Leighton Nelson was also hurt all of last year and didn't play. So he should slot in as the starter. And I think he is at the present time. But behind him, then you're looking at, people have said Mandel could be a potential backup left tackle, but I like him certainly on the interior. I think you do as well. And then there's Barrett Nelson that could be a swing tackle. And there's just, but if you get one guy in the portal, then I think you can really just add a little more competition to the room and maybe have a swing tackle of some kind, but you're going to need something because I don't love, what's on the line. We also lost Tanner Koziol, Mark Hamper, and Quincy Burrows, which when you look at the pass catchers now, there's some holes there. Obviously, the tight end, that's a big hole. And then even with Hamper and Burrows, that's just depth pieces of the receiver room that we felt like we were going to have. What's your take on the receivers? Do you think we need to go get somebody in the portal to replace some of these guys?
I think they're looking because I think that room is pretty thin on the lower end. But I will say this. I think they're fine for a wide receiver. And this is one of the things I was actually going to bring up. So right now, the guys that I would say are probably in play that we would automatically think are involved: Chris Brooks, Vinny Anthony, Tretch. You're going to have Ballard, obviously, is going to play. Eugene Hilton will be a part of everything. I think Tyrell Henry will be involved. I think Joseph Griffin is doing some nice things. He's got a chance to work his way into it. He's obviously got a big body. And I think Kyan Johnson has a chance. I honestly think it's going to be a year for him. I think he's going to be more of a guy who gets some late game play, but I don't see him being a guy they're going to rely on. But I think you're going to be 6 or 7 deep, which with this team, I think is probably pretty close to what he's probably going to run out there. But I think on the perimeter, you probably feel pretty good about most of the pieces there, because I think you're 2 deep at both spots. And then I think you're probably 2 or 3 deep in the slot if you have to. Tight end's going to be interesting. That is the position where I think we lost our ceiling, but I think we will be very solid with what we have in that spot. Akers going to be a player this year. They're going to use him like a Swiss Army knife. He's going to be short yardage back. He's going to be the guy that they use to kind of bleed out on plays. They're going to use him out on the perimeter in some bunch sets to be a guy who can kind of create some mesh routes concepts and stuff like that, and kind of just rub routes. He's really good in that type of situation. And he's a guy who's more athletic than, like, Kansas did this too. He's a guy that's going to cause some problems because you're just probably not going to account for him the way you should. And he's a better athlete than people give him credit for.
Well, while we're kind of talking about the different positions, let's go ahead and get into our spring depth chart, Justin. That's kind of one of the big things we're going to talk about today. We'll quickly skip over quarterback. There's really not much to talk about there. Billy Edwards, starter. Danny O'Neill's backing him up. That's about as clear as it gets on any position at the present time. Let's shift to running back quickly, because I think I've seen various things about.
Let's talk quarterback a little bit quick, because Carter Smith deserves some flowers here.
Okay.
Just a quick rundown on him. What I will say about him, and the thing that stuck out, the play broke down on him, and he had a great dime that he threw out to the perimeter to Kyan Johnson, where he was on the move and threw just a perfect throw to the sideline. The biggest takeaway I had from that play was simply this. Things broke down, and he didn't lose his head. He kept his eyes downfield, and he knew where his receiver was going to be. And that, to me, speaks volumes about him in comparison to what we saw last year from Mabry. Mabry seems extremely overwhelmed. I think that provided they have a chance to really work with him this year, by the end of the season, you might be looking at a guy who you're like, he might be, like at least solid. And by next season, I think that he's legitimately is going to have a competition between him and Danny O'Neill. I think he's going to push himself into that by then. he's going to need reps. It's going to take a lot of work this season, but if he busts his butt, he's definitely got some capability to get to the point where he makes that interesting.
Yeah, it's good to hear. It's good to hear that he made that kind of throw on the run, because that's a critical thing, right? Is being able to make those throws when
he made a couple of nice plays.
Yeah, and using your feet to create lanes and to create passing is massive, which will happen. Okay, so running back, Justin, my 2D based on everything that I've read and certainly what you saw over the last few weeks and seen on videos and stuff is Dylan Jones looks to be the starter. Dupree and Yakimelli both. It's going to be a 3-back room. Yakimelli most certainly is going to have more reps this year than he did. Now, obviously, Dupree did not play in yesterday's game, so Yakimelli got a lot of the reps. But you already kind of spoke on Dylan Jones. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like it's going to be a Jones number one, right? You said that. I feel like you said that earlier.
I would say it's probably so. What I would likely break this down, and Ryan and I were kind of talking about this yesterday. I told him 40, 30, 30. I think it's actually going to probably be 50% Dylan Jones. I think you're probably going to do like 30 Dupree in some sort of way, and then 20% Yakimelli is going to be the primary backup to Dylan Jones in a way. Dupree is going to be kind of the true Swiss Army knife back, in that I think you may line him up with Dylan Jones at times in the backfield and just motion him out and do some interesting things with him, because he's capable of doing that.
I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see is can Grimes get the most out of Dupree and how creative he is with him? Because we talked about last year getting him in space, we'll put him in space. Yakimelli broke out a 55-yard run yesterday. And Bo Dragon said, if Yak is busting up a 55-yard runs, the defense is going to give up 500 yards to Iowa. Bo, you got to believe in the defense a little bit more. But
that was a well-blocked play by the offensive line. I'm going to say Charles Perkins in there, who is actually looks like he's going to be a really good player this year. He got taken care of on that play, and it was one of the few plays that happened on. But it was a well-blocked run play that he broke on. There were some wins on both sides there. It wasn't like the defensive line was getting pushed around yesterday. The offensive line is going to be effective. Excuse me, is going to be very effective running the football. The defensive line is going to be solid. If you're looking for it to be dominant, then you're looking in the wrong place. It's just we're not to that point yet. There's some guys who are going to flash at times. It's going to be a lot like Elijah Hill last year, but you're not going to probably see we're not going to hold somebody to 60 yards rushing unless it's a pass-happy team.
All right, so let's move on to wide receiver. I'm going to give you my 3. So we're going to do 3 starting wide receivers, the 2 outsides in the slot, Justin, and then the backups behind him. I'm going Vinny, Tretch, and Jaden Ballard. I think that's pretty clear, the one line at this point, Vinny, Tretch, and Ballard. My 2 line is Chris Brooks, KBJ, and Eugene Hilton. And that second spot. Now, I know there's chalk of Joseph Griffin. I know he had a big catch yesterday. And also, if you disagree with any of our stuff, put it in the chat. We'll put it up there. What do you think about is your 2 line different than that?
It is actually.
Okay.
I would say Hilton probably is in there for sure. And I think that you're probably right with Brooks, but I would say Tyrell Henry
over KBJ at the slot.
KBJ right now. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's reasonable, and I've heard that Henry got a lot of run there too. I'm excited to see KBJ. I'm excited to see what he can do at the slot. I hope that happens, but we'll see. Wow, JB,
Chris Brooks, wide receiver 1. Listen, he's going to play. You've been begging for this, JB, for years now. Chris Brooks is going to be on the field this year. I will tell you that right now. He was on the field a ton yesterday, and it's clear they like his physicality. He definitely gets out there after it blocking, and I think he's a guy. If you want to use him as a possession type guy, he's got some capability there. What I would like to see from him a little bit more is him using that big body and that frame to create separation a little bit more, using the arms a little branching out when you're running downfield. He needs to be, you need to be subtle with it, but he's got so much size on corners. He's got to be able to use that size to kind of bully a little bit.
Use your body in the right way. Look, it might be different with Grimes, and that's fine. If Grimes likes him, I'm all for it. And I put him in my 2 deep as well. I will say this. Every time spring practice ends, we talk about Chris Brooks because Chris Brooks has good springs. This is now, I believe, pretty much the 3rd time this has happened. I'm in a wait-and-see mode with Chris Brooks because I expected him to be a player last year in the fall, and he was not barely seen at all. So
he was injured.
I just think
that's usual.
We'll see what happens with Chris Brooks. But I agree. the size profile that he has, that like that ability to use his body if he does it well, it is a really interesting skill set to have on the field, especially in a grime system. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, tight end. This is obviously one of those ones where so first tell me your 1 and 2, and then tell me, do you feel like we need to get a portal guy here?
So clearly number 1 is going to be, well, are we talking Y and H here? So we're obviously looking at your inline tight ends, and the guy you're probably going to split out wide more times than not is going to be Ashcraft.
Yeah.
Your Swiss Army knife H back is going to be Aker. Steck is going to be your backup tight end. I actually think he looks really good. He moves really well for his size. That was one of the things. He's a pretty fluid guy for how big he is. And then you have Seagraves that's out there too. But that I would probably say your top 2 true tight ends are going to be Steck and Ashcraft. And I think right now it's probably a Ashcraft, and then there's a fairly big gap between the rest.
Yeah, I've got Ashcraft and Steck written down as well, because of what we've heard about Steck in the spring. Now, I know a lot of people put Seagraves 2. You've got McGowan still there too, but I think Steck, first of all, Steck's got the upside. So I'm more excited about Steck because there's a guy that theoretically could move over Ashcraft at some point this year. Obviously, this was going to be Koziol's spot locked down. He's gone now, so we've got the discussion there. Do you think we need somebody? Do you think we need a portal guy here?
From a depth standpoint, I think ideally you want somebody that's a little more seasoned than Steck right now. That doesn't mean that you can't so here's how I would state this. I would like another body so you have somebody experienced if something were to happen to Ashcraft, but I do think that Steck is developed enough that you can sprinkle him in some this season in situations and get his feet wet.
No, Nazai Davis was not an early enrollee. Tyler Strieber,
he's gonna take some work too. He's got some body work to do to catch up. He's a little bit on the lighter side for tight end, but he'll get there. He's probably the most athletic out of that group.
All right, Justin, going to the line. I'm going to do this one first, and I want you to tell me where you disagree. So across the line, my number 1 is Leighton. Leighton Nelson, of course, is left tackle. Don't love that, but it is what it is. Brunner, Renfro, Mandel, and Malman. That's my starting line. And my backup line, I have the word transfer in at left tackle. There's no one on this team I want to be the number 2. I want transfer at left tackle, Ben Shawal / Cubberly. It's different, Corey backing up the center, Kadonko, another swing tackle on the right side, backing up Mandel, and then Barrett Nelson backing up the right tackle. Do you disagree with any of that?
I think I'd probably agree with that. I mean, it's pretty clear Kadonko is going to be the guy that's going to be the swing. I think that he is. I wouldn't be shocked. Like he did not stand out. He was running with the ones yesterday. He didn't stand out as being a weakness, which I think is a big deal. I just think Mandel provides more upside, and I would have said if Heywood would have been still healthy, I think there was a chance that the offensive line could have had the option for good to great. I think the ceiling has dropped now to more of a solid to good if everything goes right, because that left tackle spot's going to be potentially a troublesome area during the season. But I think the other 4 spots could be really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some publications out there saying that they think Kadonko will start at right guard, and Mandel will potentially start at left tackle or back up Leighton Nelson at left tackle. I still think Mandel is a guard. I think he's better at guard. I think you agree. So we'll see kind of how that goes. And you said Mandel played guard yesterday, yeah? In the showcase?
Yeah, he played right guard.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's where he belongs and he should be there. But so that's that. But again, put your stuff in the comments on anything else that you feel like would be different. JB says Barrett Nelson still isn't a starter. We really like O-lineman with the last name Nelson. Yes, Barrett Nelson is not a starter, and we do like a lot of Nelsons. He's my backup right tackle. So I feel like
he's been injured a lot.
And he'll be kind of a swing tackle. But like I said, I think it's crying out for a transfer because we were good with Leighton Nelson being the backup, but now that Leighton Nelson's kind of sprung into the starter role, you got to have someone behind him. I'm telling you, there's tackles in there. You got to go out and get a tackle in the portal. You have to do it.
I think that's exactly the issue here. You have that comment, and exactly what I would say is this: if Barrett Nelson was healthy right now, you probably wouldn't be looking for a transfer. The issue is that he's not healthy, so he's not getting reps behind to prove that he's a viable backup. So you can't go into fall camp wondering if you have a guy that's capable of playing that spot if something happens to your starter.
Yeah, agreed. So we'll see what the portal brings. It's taken quite a bit away from us, but we need to add some in. All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball, Justin. I think it's a little more fun to talk about 3 down linemen because we've seen a lot of things about 4 and 3 or whatever. So we're going to do 3 down linemen, or we're going to do 4 linebackers, and we're going to do 4 defensive backs. 3-4-4. I know that's not exactly what we're going to play, but for the sake of discussion, and we'll add in a 5th defensive back too, if we want to talk about it, kind of 3-4-5, if you will, which is an extra guy, I realize. But 3 down linemen. If you have 3 down linemen starting, tell me who your 3 down linemen starters are.
This is interesting. I would say, well, number 1, it's going to be Walker.
Okay.
Charles Perkins.
Yep.
That 3rd spot is the one that I have to sit here and think on because there's multiple guys that have proven that they're capable. You're probably looking at somebody like Suggs
So I have Parker Peterson written down for my 3rd. I have Peterson, Perkins, and Walker.
So I didn't see a ton of Peterson. I could see that being the case. I think there's a lot of bodies that are going to be in this rotation. I think they have a lot of options in terms of what they're going to do. The guys who I feel cemented are Walker and Perkins. Other than that, you have obviously Barton. You have potentially Suggs. You have Dylan Johnson. You have there's numerous. Okpono actually played really well yesterday. I don't think he's going to be in that group. You probably don't want to do it, but Jamel Howard I think is going to be in the rotation. So you have a lot of fresh bodies, which is nice. If you can, keep your starters going 2 sets and then have the backups come in for the third drive to be able to give them a break, that'd be awesome. Like we could not do that last year. That was an impossibility. Realistically, you probably want your starters playing about 30 snaps and your backups playing about 20. If you have a really deep line, which would make things pretty fresh throughout this entire season.
Yeah, it is. The room is a lot better than it was last year overall. And I think with the addition of basically all the starters that I listed, which are Peterson, Perkins, and Walker, and Suggs for that matter, that's a lot of new faces.
Yeah.
Of course, Barton and Johnson are still there. But I mean, honestly, if Jamel Howard is a guy and can come in there, that's basically a guy we weren't even counting on. There's a guy that we kind of thought maybe potentially a bust. And if he comes in here as something, then you really filled out the room. Now you've got legitimately 8 guys that can play this position and hopefully bring some size, which is important.
Yeah, I think what I will say about this is that's interesting is looking at this defensive line group, we have a chance for growth here that I don't think that people are understanding. There's a lot of new bodies in there. So this is their first camp. These are their first reps. It's not like these guys have 2 or 3 seasons running through this scheme with this team. You now have an opportunity to get them into fall camp and really lock in on who your rotations are. Because right now, like I said, we were rotating through a ton of guys yesterday. That's not going to be the case come game like fall camp. They're going to be more settled on who they're going to have at particular spots. And that's going to lead them into finding out, that's where the consistency is going to happen. You're going to have those guys know exactly what their job's going to be week in and week out and how much is going to be expected of them. And that should really help this defense get to where we want it to be for this year.
JB says most good teams rotate 5 or 6 D linemen through a game. You don't want guys taking 45 snaps a game. You'll have nobody healthy at the end of the season.
And we did that last year.
Dragon adds good teams, not teams with 5-game losing streaks. Bo Dragon's in a little bit of a mood on this Easter Sunday. Bo, I hope you have a nice Easter. It doesn't sound like you're having a very good Easter, Bo. I've been seeing your comments already. All right, let's go to the linebackers, Justin.
Did he have his Dean Martin Easter Sunday meal or what?
All right, so inside, again, not too many changes here, I guess, with the spring. I feel like Allegro and Curtis clearly starters, clearly guys that can be really impactful. Behind them, looks like Turner, maybe Heiberger, Jancy. What are you thinking there?
I think it's going to be Turner, and I actually think Catalano is going to get in that group.
Okay, Catalano. All right.
Yeah, so I think he is really flashed. He's advanced, which stinks because there are some other bodies in that room. There is depth there. I think Janzy is a guy that they feel confident. Heiberger is I'm hoping he's back by the fall, but right now it will be interesting to see what happens there. What I will say, he's not really okay. So we're playing like a 3-3-5 overhang. So Witt and him are being listed as interior guys. It's more like a soft edge. Like they're off the line, kind of hanging on that side, like they're sitting there ready to rush if necessary, but otherwise they're kind of in space. And I look at that and I'm like, well, you're kind of just playing a 3-4 here with them not necessarily being on the line. But they're not going to be like our true interior guys. They're going to be kind of in space where they have some flexibility.
Right. Yeah, that's why I decided to do 3-4 today, just because it just makes sense. It's a little cleaner too to discuss. Yeah. Okay, on the outside, who are your starters on the outside, do you think?
This is where things are going to get far more interesting compared to last year. Like when I brought up Walker, I felt like yesterday there are legitimate early down packages and late down pass rush packages.
Okay.
So the late pass rush packages we were looking at was Fierbury and Cheeks on the edges, and the rundowns it was more Walker, Garner being the guys that are out there, and then having more of like Witt on the other side, or I'm going to guess Daryl Peterson be the other edge guys who are really going to stack up better against the run.
So then the rundowns, you're really looking at more 4 down linemen at that point, like 4 guys for hands in the dirt.
It's not being called that, but to me, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, and obviously Reiger is a guy that still is around, right? Reiger's not playing right now, but Reiger comes back, and he's kind of like that starting outside linebacker / defensive end, if you will.
He's going to be your early down pass rush guy because, like, I think that realistically, he's the guy they want opposite of Walker. He's the guy they want is that like step off the line guy who can just come off the edge. And
that's, if you have Reiger, Walker, Perkins, and then Peterson / Barton / Suggs or something,
in there,
pretty solid line at that point. And then, I mean, I still think Daryl Peterson's still going to be a guy. Like every year he's going to be here. He sounds like he's going to be a starter. I think he still starts. And then I think, say, like Cheeks and Fierbury, who I wrote down, and then Clayton's going to get run. So he's going to be very situational, it sounds like, right? I mean, pass rush.
I would be shocked if he's coming in at anything less than 3rd and 5. Like, he's just not a guy that is ready yet to stand up if somebody actually runs at him. He'll get there. I think he's a guy who you legitimately can see him being at like 245 and being able to still really run. But right now, he's more of you just can't stay in front of me when he's pass rushing. He's a guy who's just so quick on his feet that you can't, as a tackle, move with him.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's go to the outside and talk about the cornerbacks a little bit. First of all, tell me what you saw yesterday from these guys. Obviously, Hallman and Forkern are starters. That's not really much of a discussion there. Beyond them, tell me what you saw, what you liked about the cornerbacks, and kind of how you feel like this fits into the depth.
Yeah, I would say that Agard is a guy you feel really confident being in the 2 deep. I think that he's clearly going to be a starter next year, but he is a guy who I think if we weren't so deep last year, probably would have got some reps. He looks good this year. And I think we saw yesterday, Jay Harper actually had some really good reps too. So he's a guy who's coming along. He wasn't as advanced coming in as Agard is. And I think that he has taken some definite steps. He looks like he's stepping up. Latimer, I think, is a guy who's going to play obviously in the slot. I think he's going to be the guy there, which honestly, what you're looking for then is a backup slot guy. I think we actually are going to be plenty deep. Like realistically, having a couple of young corners be your backups is what most teams probably have. It's really hard to get guys to stick around and have multiple senior, like junior, senior level corners still there that have experience. It just doesn't happen that often anymore.
I think that's exciting. When you talk about the youth playing at that, like Agard, obviously Latimer, Deani Hill is another guy who's probably going to see that 2 deep. Jameer Scott,
probably the backups. I would say is the backup slot.
Right. I mean, there's just a lot of cornerbacks, and you're right. This was an issue that had we not had the return of Forkern and Hallman, we would be talking about serious problems.
Yeah.
With Hallman and Forkern, we all of a sudden have a really deep room. Right. I mean, it goes from a issue. Listen, one guy makes a difference. That's exactly what we talked about the offensive line. When you lose Kevin Heywood, the entire line gets hanky, and you're like, what's going on here? Well, Rico Hallman coming back and Nyzir Forkman getting his other year of eligibility makes a massive difference there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's finish it off with safeties, and we'll get into some questions while we finish off the show here. So Zachman and Brown really appear to be the guys. I know if we're looking at nickel, Brown could be the nickel. What'd you think? Matt Young, trainer, that's who I have behind them. Do you feel any differently to that?
I felt like Young is a guy who seems somewhat package dependent right now. He was in on their goal line stuff, which I think they like his physicality at that point. The young guys were playing quite a bit yesterday. It'll be really interesting. I don't know how settled that group is. We could see one of the young guys, Diener Emmerich, break into that 2 deep, and it wouldn't shock me. Athletically, those 2 guys, I don't know how long it's been since we've seen 2 guys as rangy as those 2 on the back end. And I think that that's a big deal. Trainer and them, I don't think that I don't know if he's actually ahead of them. Like, I think they're probably all kind of cycling through multiple players there. But I think those 2 guys are hits. I'm just going to be very clear on it. Both Emmerich and Dean are going to be guys that have a ton of upside and are, I think, likely going to be your starters as potentially as early as next year.
Wow. And Emmerich had a pick yesterday at Billy Edwards, which was good to see. Not good to see for Billy Edwards, but we'll take it from the defensive side of the ball.
Oh, it wasn't Billy Edwards. That was on Carter.
Oh, was that Carter?
Yeah, Carter got picked by Emmerich.
See, again,
I don't believe Braylon Edwards had Billy Edwards had a pick yesterday.
Did he? Okay, good. That's good.
He mostly took care of the ball. There was not a ton for him to work with.
I could have swore it was Edwards, but I wasn't there.
Yeah,
so
it was Carter Smith. It was a very freshman level. Like, you should not have thrown that football.
Yeah.
It was my take on that one, and it's going to happen with him. I'm okay with that.
It's fine. He's taking chances, being brave. Like, that's okay right now. Let's get into some questions here. A couple things here. Tyler Schreiber asked, prediction for Rico. Can he get back to how he was in 2023? Obviously, Rico had 7 picks, if I remember correctly, in 2023. He had like 1 or 2, or even, I don't know, maybe 1 last year. What do you think about?
Did he have one?
Any?
I don't think he had any. What I will say on this, I think he gets back on the board with a couple of picks. I think what we're looking for with him is I don't want to see him look like he's getting beat against teams like Nebraska and stuff like that, where we look like we got beat up a little bit. That can't happen. If he's capable of locking down some of that stuff, him and Forkgreen, they could look really good. I do think that the pass rush is going to be better this year. I don't know what that means, but it will be. I would be shocked if we're under 2 sacks a game. So mid-20s, low 30s for sacks, I think, is probably a reasonable range for this team, which is going to be a significant bump. And especially if the tackles for loss can be up significantly, the defense is going to be more in that 50 to 60 range rather than being in the 100 plus range.
I will say, I think I do expect a bigger year, Tyler, from Rico Hallman, because last year he came in as the guy. He was coming off a 7-pick season. He was coming in as one of the premier cornerbacks potentially in the country last year, and he didn't really show that. And now he's ready to go play NFL ball, and he knows that he's going to need to show up. And that's why he came back. He came back because he needed to. And I think he's basically
put on some good weight.
He's using last year to push him. We talk a lot about competition, iron sharpens iron. His last season is going to sharpen this year. Like, he understands that all those defensive scouts are like, okay, well, you had a great year 2 years ago. Your last year was pretty average. So what are you going to do now? Your last year in college, can you be an NFL cornerback? I think he actually comes to play hard this year because he knows that when he didn't last year, look what happened. And if he wants to go to league next year, which I think that he will, that's going to be a good one.
He looks really strong.
Yeah,
he put on a lot of good weight.
KPB says, I would rather see a controlled scrimmage against Power 4 school like they do in basketball or the pros. I would love to see that too, but I don't think that's ever really going to happen with injuries and things like that.
Well, plus you're opening yourself up to be scouted by the other team, which, like somebody talked about how they're not putting out the speed things anymore from Brady Collins.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, of course they're not. You're basically handing out a scouting report on guys who your best athletes are on the team. Like, why would you want to hand that to everyone else publicly and say, these are the guys who, have our most speed and twitch? That just seems like a terrible idea.
Justin, Bill Woj asks, do we have an eventual first or second rounder on this team? What are your thoughts?
I would say we probably feel pretty good about Heywood. I think long-term Mandel has a chance to work himself into that. What I will say is this. I can't say how many top of the draft guys we're going to have. I can tell you that I think there's going to be quite a few guys that now – this is the first spring game that I've watched where I'm like, there's legitimate a bunch of guys that are popping that look like they have some high-end talent. Like there are guys who aren't stars now who I think can work into being that level. They're not, it's not locked in stone that they're going to be that, but they're flashing quite a bit and there's capability. Like Clayton's one of those guys. He's flashing so much that you look at it and you're like, I have a hard time believing that this guy as early as next year isn't a star off the edge.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I agree. I think there are first and second rounders on this team. I think the first one that comes to mind, not going to play this year, it's Kevin Heywood. I think when he gets back to playing, comes back from this ACL injury, I think you're going to see a lot from him. I think eventual first rounder, second rounder for me as well is Christian Allegro. I mean, I think that to me is about as clear. I think Christian Allegro is the next superstar on this defense. I really do. I think we saw it from the moment he touched the field 2 years ago. And the sideline to sideline speed that he possessed, and he made a huge difference coming in 2 years ago. And then last year had a good year again, and I think he's primed for a solid.
Him and Tackett are going to be a really good tandem. I will say that right now. Tackett looks much improved.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about Tackett. I'm impressed. I'm happy that I'm hearing a lot of good things about Tackett.
Yeah, that group is going to be really impressive on the inside, and I think that they're going to be the ones that run this defense. Like if this ends up being a good defensive unit, it's going to be because those two guys are just studs.
Yeah. Bo Dragon says, we don't need a superstar. We need competency. Yes, you're right, Bo. I agree. I think that we have it, though, more so than we've had in years past, which is good to see. All right, we will leave it there. Justin, final thoughts. Bo, anything else you want to touch on from the spring? Anything, the practice you saw yesterday? Anything other last final notes?
Well, all I'll say is this. There's been a lot of talk about how all these great talent were brought in the last couple of classes and how, why aren't they on the field yet? And I will say this, they're coming. There's a ton of young guys that are going to be the core of this team starting as early as next year. And there's some real players in those two recruiting classes that they brought in that I think have a chance to really elevate this group and really give us a chance to make as early as 2026 being a far improved football team in terms of just the talent level and being able to really play with some of the higher end talent teams that we've had to play. So this is going to be a big learning year, but those guys, I think we're going to see a lot more of those young guys on the field this year, kind of earning their keep and proving that they deserve the chance to be those stars next year.
Bo Dragon says, I'm ready for football. Yes, I agree with you. And then, of course, fire guard. Bo, no. I'm not going to be hearing that stuff today. That's not going to happen.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, fire guard. Happy Easter to everyone, though, for sure. And if you missed the top of the show, breaking news, Maddox Cochrane did commit today, 6'7", 280-pound offensive lineman from Richmond, Virginia. So go check out the beginning of the show. You'll hear us talk a little bit about Maddox Cochrane. And listen, after spring ball completely finishes, we're going to get a lot into recruiting. Now, that's kind of the next big thing. OV's coming up. Justin loves his June visits. So we'll be talking a lot about those guys to really help fill out this 26 class before we then really turn our attention to fall football, which is going to be fantastic. We'll also touch on basketball, of course, as things progress in the portal there as well. But happy Easter to all of you. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Bucky Report. And as always, on Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.